This was Gorbals Street, originally called Main Street, as it looked back in the late 1950s. And this is how it looks today. It is not easy to recognise it as the same street, but fortunately a few landmarks still remain. The old tenement that now stands forlorn and derelict on Gorbals Street is one of only a few original buildings still standing from the Gorbals clearances. This tenement is in the area known as Lauriston, and as you can see it is in a severe state of disrepair, waiting to be regenerated itself, but in its day it would have been one of the better tenements in the area. Now huge high-rise blocks tower above it, themselves the subject of much local speculation as to if or when they too will be reduced to rubble. The tenement itself used to house the British Linen Bank, and the Rob Roy Bar used to stand next door to it, one of many hundreds of pubs in the Gorbals of the past. If the Gorbals was short on economic prosperity, it was never short of places where you could drink your miseries away.
I was a barman at the Morven, and I did the Cecil too. I had a wee stint at the Citizens and I went to Jackson's for a few. The Cumberland Arms had its charms and Roper's produced a fine brew. The Rob Roy Bar never produced a star, but it always had a queue. The High had its characters and Doyle's at the Cross, and the Holly Tree had no tinsel, but the service was always fast. The pubs were always bulging, but now they're all gone too. Are all the drinkers dead and gone, like horses, turned to glue?
Close by the Rob Roy Bar stood the Gorbals Baths, demolished in 1981. A small park stands on the site. Tenements in those days had no bathroom and most had outside toilets, so once a week most people would go to the public baths for a wash. Sometimes the baths and the steamy were together, so women could go there not only to wash themselves but to wash the family's clothes. There were a few steamies then, notably on Gorbals Street and Old Rutherglen Road, but the only one remaining today, albeit derelict, lies in the adjacent Oatlands area. Across the road from the baths was the Citizens Theatre, one of the few buildings from the past still standing in this street. It would be wrong to suggest the Citizens is a Gorbals theatre. In reality it is a theatre that just happens to be situated in the Gorbals. More popular amongst Gorbalonians was the building next door to it, which used to be the Palace Picture Hall. Sadly the palace is long gone and the space where it once stood is now a car park for the citizens. The pictures were the big entertainment in the days before television came, and the queues outside were often entertained by a range of local talent.
I remember Frankie McCusker, the cinema queue busker. He could sing, he could dance, and play moothy. And he made a few coppers for the line of picture goers, to oil a throat that was awfully kind of drouthy. Then TV came to end his playing days. The queues vanished like snow off a dike. The picture halls became bingos and he lost his vocation overnight.
The junction at the bottom of Gorbals Street is Gorbals Cross, practically unrecognisable from the past. Yet the cross was once the hub of all life here, but now, well, it has lost all of its character and looks like just another junction. Everyone still asks what happened to the big round clock. Nobody seems to know. Today it is a soulless intersection, but to everyone who lived here, this was the heart of the Gorbals. People from every street and of all nationalities met at Gorbals Cross. Gorbals Cross, as befits its status in the past as the heart of the Gorbals, was also a regular meeting place for couples on a first date. Sadly, not all dates materialised.
My name was Izzy O'Rourke, and I'd been there since 7 o'clock, waiting for my click to show. On the corner of Boots, with my bleached blonde roots, where the hell was my Romeo? But I knew I was in a dizzy, standing there, feeling silly, because it was nearly 7:45. Still I waited and shivered, odding up like a dog's dinner, just in case it would turn up late. And if it did, I'd have a face like fizz and a tongue ready to attack it. But deep inside, I'd sigh with relief and resist the temptation to smack it.
The area to the west of Gorbals Cross is Lauriston, named after the man who developed the land in the 19th century. This is Bedford Street, showing the old Cochrane shop at the corner of Bedford Street and Coburg Street. The Morven Bar stood at the corner of Bedford Street and South Portland Street. Many of the tenements in Lauriston deserved to be demolished, but others that could have been saved and refurbished met the same fate. The tenements of the past were so overcrowded and packed so closely together that there was little room for privacy. Whatever went on in your house, everybody was sure to hear about it. The streets of Lauriston, like all the others, resounded to children at play. There were no parks and children had to play in the streets and pavements. Pictured here is Betty Woodburn, aged 4, born in Herbertson Street. Also snapped as children were Betty Olson and family. Both still live in the Gorbals and have seen regenerations come and go. In the streets, boys played football or cowboys and Indians, and girls played at shops. Wherever you went in the Gorbals, there would always be one little girl playing that game that every little girl played.
Her name was Ginty Hall, and she stood there playing ball on the dirty chalk-filled tenement wall. She went to Jenny Grocer's to buy her rare wee stoters. She played for hours till she got cold. 1, 2, 3, O'Leary. I wonder why she never got weird, a stoating boys up against a wall. She liked to skip and hop and play at games of shot, but her favourite game of all was ball.
Close by Bedford Street stood Portugal Street, where the old St John's Church once stood. The church was demolished in the 1980s, and the ground still stands empty and neglected to this day. Also on Portugal Street was the old model lodging house, where the homeless of the past could find shelter. The building looks quite impressive. It has gone the same way as all the others. A tiny stretch of Portugal Street remains, but there are no buildings now. Close by Portugal Street was Dunmore Street. Once it too was filled with tenements and people, now has completely vanished. The street was fondly remembered by former resident John Mitchell and his family, pictured here in the early 1940s. Another well-known character within the tenements was the local midwife. Often elderly and with no medical qualifications, these women, for they were always women, had only a vast wealth of experience and knowledge in helping to deliver children. And in the days when money was hard to come by and doctors had to be paid for, the midwife was never short of work, most of it unpaid. Adjacent to Dunmore Street was Norfolk Street. It ran from Gorbals Cross to Bridge Street and still does to this day. Norfolk Street is one of the few streets in the area that retains some original tenements and gives you a good idea of how well designed some of the Gorbals tenements were. Most of the tenements were demolished, but a few somehow survived the mass clearance, when similar buildings of architectural stature literally bit the dust. While the stone-clean tenements on Norfolk Street show off the grand carving used, it should be remembered that the tenements did not always look so grand. Slum landlords became the scourge of the Gorbals, packing human beings in like sardines, while remaining oblivious to the need for maintenance of their properties. With a great influx of immigrants into the Gorbals from Ireland, Poland, Lithuania and Russia, there was a pressing need for accommodation. Many tenements were vastly overcrowded, crumbling inside and out and infested with bugs, much to the consternation of parents with children. The new high-rise flats that now sit in Norfolk Street are an improvement in the tenements, but to many who live in them today it's not so much of an improvement. It is sad to think that as we approach a new millennium, Gorbals people still have to live in slums. In the modern high-rise prisons, it is ironic that many people, particularly the elderly, still long for the old tenements.